So it is this negotiating that we do with our relationships if we want them to last. It's the same thing with our kids. Like who they are at 2 is not who they are at 10. It's not who they are at 15. It's not going to be who they are, right? So I have to grow with them.
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface. Welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface. I am so excited and honored to be here with you today, Natalie. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to be in conversation with you, with a fellow author. And I'm just so excited to hear more about your journey and about your life and your perspective. I feel like you have such a beautiful perspective that you bring. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I always love starting off with giving you the space to share more about who you are. And it's like the big loaded question, oh my gosh, who am I and what do I do, and encompassing ourselves in words, pardon. But whatever comes to mind and whatever feels good for you right now, I'd love to hear more.
Okay, like that question is always like like a double shot because you're like, how much do I share? What do I share? But just on the surface, and then we can just dig into what you want to dig into. I'm a life coach, a relationship coach, and a grief coach, and they all really like intersect, right? I've picked them up along the way of the journey. It's been about 25 years. Started all this in the 90s, and it has just really taken a life of its own. And I kind of have always been a person that kind of trusted the journey, that wherever I'm supposed to be, I'll end up landing. It is what it is, kind of free flowy kind of person. So, I always wanted to get into being able to benefit other people's lives, help other people. And I was able to do that so beautifully. Like the life just opened up and allowed me to step into that place. Started off like doing parenting classes, which turned into personal development classes, that turned into me doing premarital courses, that turned into me doing stuff with the family. And it just was really kind of happened that way. And so, with all of my clients that I've had, I have just really allowed them to speak to me. And whatever I didn't know, that was cue to me to go find it, right? Go find the answer, go find the way. I believe fully that everybody is so uniquely themselves that if I was to go into any of this with me knowing already, then I've already failed them. So I kind of go in already with, okay, teach me. All my new clients, I say, you are the expert on your life. You are teaching me. I just pave a way, right? We are co-creators in this. And so you just need a little help with creation. So that's where I am to aid you along the walk, not me being all knowledgeable. And so that's kind of how just my career has kind of moved very eclectically, of picking up stuff from all different places. And then my mom passed away when I was about 26. And from there, that's when I started researching grief, because grief is something we don't talk about. We just kind of figure it out in the corner and we try to come out the best we can, right? And so with that, my daughter was like 18 months when she passed away, and I was committed to grieving. I didn't know what it looked like, what it meant, or what it would entail, but I knew that I had to be present for my daughter. And so I didn't want her to grow up and say, you weren't there, you were a shadow of yourself. And my only answer is, well, my mom died, right? Like, I feel like that would not be excusable. So I said, let me figure out what grieving is. And so I researched it from, of course, our Western perspective, but then I went into African tribal ways of it and Jewish ways and how the Native American and how the Asian community kind of dealt with it. And I just bridged it all together. And then as everything almost that occurs in my life, I'm like, oh, I should teach this to other people. And so I started having grief support groups. Of course, I went and got certified in grief, support and all that kind of stuff. But it was really just an evolution
Mm,
of it all, how everything kind of intersects. And I think the biggest thing that I learned with grief in particular of how much it affects every aspect of our lives. So we
yeah.
sometimes think of grief just the death of a person, but we fail to grieve all the little deaths that have occurred since birth almost, right? Like we've been grieving
Yes.
since birth. And we as little kids we kind of get permission, but then once we hit like 5, 6, 7, everybody's like shut that down and figure it out. Come on, we are losing, right? So figure out how to lose and shut up and move with it. But it's like the ghost of grief
Mm,
follows us, and when we give ourselves permission to really do it out loud, right,
yeah.
and not embarrassed about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
like in my grief group, I tell them, like, you have to give yourself permission. You have to say, I get to be here as long as I need to be here, and I'm going to do it even if you're uncomfortable. Because that's what I learned through mine. I was like, everybody was uncomfortable with me because it took me a long time to get on the other side with my mom. Long time, right? And so I'm like, this is where I am. Y'all gonna have to work with me through
Yeah.
it. I'm sad today again. I'm crying again. I can't do this again. And when you are able to walk in that, assuredly that it's okay for me to be here, life looks
Mm.
different.
Oh my
You know?
gosh. One thing that like stands out that you just said was do it out loud, and not necessarily just grief, but yes, 1,000,000% to the aspect of grief. But when we talk about just like do it out loud, right? Like do that healing, that the work, do it out loud. It is so human, like human. I mean that in the sense of like as we witness it, when we can witness
Yes,
someone on that, there is just this beautiful, it comes down to like vulnerability. Vulnerability is the thing that brings us together. Vulnerability is the thing
yes,
that connects us. Um, and and to be able to just witness each other, I feel like we can see each other more as humans, and
yeah,
not put people on pedestals, and just I guess also too, I don't know, funny how this is coming up, but you mentioned too, like being better humans. Like that's literally what this is. If we give ourselves all
right?
permission to do the work out loud, to be messy when we do it, to just
Oh,
be in our truth all the time,
all the time. Yeah,
all the time, it
yeah,
also is
yeah.
so freeing for us too. And
Oh,
especially I think
absolutely.
as women too, like
Oh,
us
yeah,
being together, I think about it from the perspective of us being women and being in our truth, because of the difference in terms of cycles that we have compared to man woman. Like have different cycles. But how much shame and guilt sometimes that comes for us women when we are not feeling 100% and we just were yesterday. It's kind of like it messes with our
yeah,
brain, and we're kind of like, wait a second, I was just like on top of the world yesterday, and now I'm in a whole different space. But giving ourselves permission, I think, is such a big part to just be in our truth.
yeah, yeah. And it's like two aspects of that. I actually have a free course that's called How to Be a Better Human. And it's like 5 steps to just being better humans, right? And such a
I
huge
love
part
it.
of that is one, living in the day, right? We get 24 hours. We only have to really deal with the 24. Sometimes, not to say we don't plan and do all that, but the 24 is what we've been gifted right now. Let's see what we're
Mm-hmm.
going to do here. That other
Yeah.
aspect of learning how to live and being enough, where we wake up with different capacity, right? And so if my
Yeah.
capacity yesterday was like 85%, and I
Mm-hmm.
wake up today and my capacity is 55, I have to honor that. If I give 55%, then I've given 100%, right? Because I've given all that I had. It was enough for today. And I don't have to beat myself up that I wasn't at the 85 that I was yesterday. That I can just be human and say, we're supposed to cycle. We're never supposed to just be here. We're supposed to go up and down. Sometimes we're on it. Sometimes we're terrible. Sometimes life is giving us, just roses upon roses. And sometimes all we get is rocks. And so it's like, when I got rocks, I'm not going to act like when I got a rose. I mean, that wouldn't even make good sense. So it's learning how to, right, move with how life is presenting it to you and being flexible enough to be able to acknowledge that today I'm not at full capacity, but this capacity I'm at is enough, you know?
Oh,
Um,
yes.
and then to the other point where you were talking about men and women, right? And I just have this thing. Men and women are very different, right? In the way we were socialized and all of that. But at the core of our humanity, we are so much more alike than we are different. And we have been
Yes.
taught that we are always different, that we can't do these things, and this, and this is the male perspective, and this is the female perspective, and men can't communicate, and women are over emotional. And just in this line of work,
Mm.
I have seen both people on both different spectrums, right? We're women that cannot communicate and men that communicate beautifully. Women that are hard as nails and men that are so in touch with their emotions is something else, right? It's like, when do we embrace that at the core of who we are? We were made almost the same, right? Now we have different roles we play. There's different ways society has taught us we can be and we can't be. But if we were ever, and I always do this with my married couples, get to the core of who your person is, right? Find the
Mm.
humanity in them, because what we all want is about the same, right? We want love and acceptance and appreciation and respect, and we want someone to handle us with care and concern and love and gentleness. We want to be seen and heard. That doesn't differ with the sexes. Now,
It
how we
does
go
not.
about doing it, right? The definitions we give to it is different, but the
Mm-hmm.
basis of it really is the same. And I think if as humans, we could just show up as humans instead of these other things, I think we could connect more. I think that point you're making about with vulnerability, we wouldn't be so afraid of it. That we would just
Mm-hmm.
open up and be like, yeah. And even though if we get hurt, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
this is what my belief is. I've been hurt more times than you can count, right? And being vulnerable, right? And being honest
Yeah.
and authentically me. But at least it's me that's being
Mm-hmm.
denied. At least it's the true me that you walked away from, not my
Mm-hmm.
presentation. Because if you walked away from my
Yeah.
presentation, I can make a whole lot of excuses. But if you walked away from the core of me, then your experience of me just wasn't that great. But that don't make me less. That just makes your
Yeah.
experience of me look different. And I respect that, right? I
Yep.
respect when people have to leave me because they don't experience me well. Because if I don't
Mm.
experience somebody well, I want to be able to walk too. So if we live without the
Exactly.
hypocrisy, I got to give you respect when you got to go, but you got to respect me when I got to go.
1,000,000%. Oh my gosh. Like, everything that is coming out of your mouth, I'm like, I feel like there's so many just things that I've thought about and have wanted to talk about, and that is such a big piece around, we we want to be able to let go and, like you said, walk away from the relationships that aren't serving us. And 100%, that's a form of us showing ourselves how much we respect ourselves, how much we value ourselves, how much we love ourselves. And we get offended, we take it personal when someone else does it, because
Hmm.
it's giving us that feeling of rejection. And
Yes.
these things that you're mentioning too remind me of this book that I read. I feel like I must have read this book almost 10 years ago, but it completely changed my life, and it talks about some of the
Hmm.
things that you shared already. It's called The Four Agreements. I don't know
Uh
if you've
huh.
heard of it or if you've read of it, but it talks about that whole piece around always doing your best, and that's exactly it, right? If I've got 55% but I give 55, I gave my best today. And
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up, but it also talks about the two things that changed my life were don't take things personally. Um, that was one of the things that completely like rocked my world. And just
Mhm.
like, when you hear something that you're like, damn, this completely, like, it's the hard truth that we
Mhm.
need to hear. But when you can really take that perspective on and wear it and try it on, I started navigating so many things in my life differently. Relationships, of course, was such a big part of it. But yeah, just all aspects of communication, even at being at work, right? On
Mhm.
the other end, where I have someone who's yelling at me because they're upset, I can actually create this boundary of this is not
Yeah.
about me. This has nothing to do with me. And I can
Mhm.
hold space for this person to be feeling what they're feeling. I can hold that space for this person, but it doesn't mean it's anything about me. And that
Mhm.
piece is really important for us to be able to remember when we do have those moments. I think, again, it comes back to allowing all of ourselves, including ourselves, be able to stand and take charge in our own worth and
Yeah.
self-love, and not make it about us when someone does choose to do that. Yes, it of course it hurts. And the thing that I was thinking about too is that, you know, we I get very sad. Like, it breaks my heart when people take, rejection or something along those lines, and they, give up on love, and they throw in the towel and quote unquote. And I'm kind of like, what a shame,
Yeah.
because love is the most euphoric experience that you can
Mhm.
experience in this life. And how you're stopping yourself from experiencing that because of one person, because of one
Yeah.
experience. And yeah, it breaks my heart. And I was thinking about that as you were talking about it. It's just like, yes, move through those emotions that come up in those moments where things get hard, but it's also not stopping yourself from living and experiencing.
Mhm.
And at least this was I'm curious about your own experience with you losing your mom, but that was such a big part of my experience with grief. I've lost a lot of people. A lot of all my grandparents, unfortunately, have passed on. But my first experience with loss was actually when I was 13, and it was my cousin who passed, and he passed suddenly. He was only 20.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
is something that just doesn't really
Sure.
make sense to you as a young child. And sometimes you're kind of just like, how does this make sense? But I've always carried this belief where, yes, I grieve and there's sadness some days, of course,
Mhm.
especially being in a period of my life where, I'm getting married and I'm thinking about, oh my God, my grandparents are not going to be there. Like,
Yeah.
there's those feelings, right? But I get to make that choice every single day where I walk with so much pride for the people that I was able to know, and the
Mhm.
love that I got to experience through them, and
Yeah.
be able to really continue to pass down the stories and the things that I've learned from them, and continue
Mhm.
to live my life. And not, because unfortunately, like, what am I going to do? I'm still here. I can't, right? Like, I can't just
Yeah.
stop. I can't just, my life is not going to stop. Everyone's life is going to continue on. But I'm curious if you've had that like experience too. How was that for you, and your experience with your mom?
Well, yeah, you know what, the first experience I had with like a really hard death was me and my husband been together since I was 16. So his little sister passed away at 4.
Wow.
And
Oh my
that
gosh.
shook my world, right? Because it was like, how does this happen to a 4-year old, right? Like, this is crazy. I did not realize what was imparted to me from
Mm-hmm.
dealing with that loss, and to see how it then manifested, right? So, of course, there's a series of losses, right? And so then, me and my husband got married. His mom passed away. A few years later, my mom passed away. And it was in my mom passing away that I had to face all the other deaths. because I had just pushed them
Mm.
aside again. No one talks about grief or the impact, right? And I see everyone else around me just moving, figuring out, trying to. And then when my mom passed away, it was this complete shock because she died suddenly of
Mm.
this is what this is, or this is how this shifts you. So it was like I fully embraced the shift. I fully embraced, I was lost, I was angry, I was every other thing that you can think of. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And where do I put it? How do I keep functioning? How do I keep my heart open? And it was the
Mm.
exploration of that as well, right? Because then in that,
Yeah.
you have this decision: do I stay open or do I go closed? Do I keep
Yeah.
everyone at bay so I never feel hurt again? And just keep this little hurt that I have and nurse it, right? Because it can become your companion. Choosing to be comforted, choosing to heal is all choices that we constantly are making, right? Keeping my heart open was a choice that I had to constantly make because there were so many heartaches that came after that. And so if you align that with the loss of, like a person who's so big, and my mom was like the biggest, best ever person ever,
Mm-hmm.
um, with then all the other secondary losses that come,
Yeah.
you constantly are facing choices, right? And the choice, the safest choice, though we think in the beginning, is let me shut the world out. Let me not deal with anybody because at least it's safer here. I got myself, me and me gonna work this out somehow, right? But then you
Yeah.
realize I gotta let all this other in because I am not, and I know this may go a little bit against society, I'm not fully complete just by myself because I
Mm.
need the love and the affection and the care, the concern of other people to help me feel fully
Yeah.
me. Because a part of every good person that loves me and takes care of me ignites another part of me, right? It makes me
Mm.
fully know all of me. Who I am as a wife is very different. Who I am as a mom is very different. Who I am as a sister is very different. Who I am as a friend. So if I cut out any of those components, a part of me is not alive as it would be
Mm.
if I engaged in all of them, right? So when I say
Wow.
complete, not meaning that if I lost them all, I would lose all of me, but there's parts of me that would be lost because I am that
Yeah.
way with them, and that ignites me. And I don't see that as a weakness, I see that as a strength because in me
Yes.
allowing them in, right? We talk sometimes about giving love, but we don't talk about receiving. It is easier to give than it is to receive, right? The
Yes.
vulnerability is in receiving. The vulnerability is in saying, I need you, right? I want you. Like I want this to be something for me. And if you did walk away, it would wound me. Wounding and devastating are two different things, right? I can be wounded
Mm.
and still find the strength to get back up, heal it, and keep going and keep my heart open for someone else to come in. The devastation of when I then cut off my limbs, right? And that's where we have to be careful that I'm not cutting off parts of my heart because other people left it. And it's a sometimes a delicate balance, and I hope I'm clear in this. It's a delicate
Yeah.
balance in between severing and just repairing. And you don't want to make the mistake in severing when you could have just repaired. And I get when people have to close themselves away for a moment because they have to
Mm-hmm.
repair alone, and you need that solitude. You need to be able
Yeah.
to belly ache and have a pity party and feel bad about yourself and be the victim. Like, I think that's healthy to be able to
Yeah.
have periods of that. But then
Yeah.
you've got to go back to restoration, right? And talk
Mm.
yourself back up and remember who you are, and all of the things that though they could not stay, it did not take away from all of who I am. The other aspect that I'll throw in is we always have to always own our own piece of the pie. I think
Mm.
it becomes very toxic when everyone's the
Yeah.
problem and I am not. I am
Yes.
the constant in every relationship I have, right? It's always just me. That doesn't mean that
Yes.
I deserve everything that happened, but I still am the constant. So if I don't look at me first, I can miss very vital pieces. that I need to be able to hold on to. I mean, I got mess on me, right? Like there's parts of my personality that stinks. I can understand why some people don't want to roll with me for a long period. I can be me, right? So it's okay for me to acknowledge and embrace my weak points, my ugly points. It doesn't take away from my beauty. It doesn't take
Mm-hmm.
away from my great points, but I do need to
Mm-hmm.
know about them, right? So when
Yes.
we just walk in this toxic positivity, and it's just self love means not seeing any of my ugly, you're going
Mm.
down a road of destruction because then you never get to really pivot and change. Like I need
Yes.
to know that sometimes I'm rude, right? I need to know sometimes I'm abrasive. All right. I need to know sometimes I get cold and I reject you. I need to know these things so that when you bring it to me, I'm not just throwing you out the door. I'm able
Yeah.
to say, yeah, that's one of my bad ones. Can you work
Yeah.
with me in this? I'm learning, right?
Yeah. And that's what I feel like that's a big part of also what makes us better humans when we can really look at all parts of ourselves. Right? Like I've always said, knowing our know thyself. Like that when you really know yourself, there is so much power in that. So much power in knowing where you are a genius, a rock star,
Yes.
and not being afraid and not putting those blinders up to
Hmm.
the parts of ourselves that we don't want to go there. I don't want to look at that part of
Yeah.
myself. I don't want to look at, the fact that like I shut down in confrontation, right? Like, and yet I will say, like, from my own experience and just validating that piece,
Hmm.
I was honestly growing up someone who hated confrontation, like
Hmm.
terrified of public speaking,
Yeah.
confrontation, having any sort of like any sort of like real depth conversation. I
Hmm.
was very uncomfortable with. And things present itself, and this is I was thinking about this earlier when you were sharing the way that things have just you've kind of just been on
Yeah.
your path and you've just followed the breadcrumbs is what I always say. That it sounds like that has been like your career is just you one foot in front of the other and you're kind of picking up these little breadcrumbs and it's coming into your basket almost in a
Right.
sense. And it's such a beautiful thing when you can stay. Oh, I feel like a huge part of this is staying open to allowing that to happen.
Yes.
Right? Because sometimes if you're so hyper focused on, no, this has to be my path, you miss everything else. Oh, all the other pieces that are supposed to be a part of it too.
Yeah.
Um, but then I had this piece that my own journey of being able to get onto this path, and then all of a sudden I'm on stages and speaking, and it's like this is such a polarity as to who I was
Mhm.
as a child, but we all have this opportunity and these choices that we
Yes.
get to make to be able to do something different, right? Like I will never forget that first time that I walked on a stage, terrified, sweating, felt like I was going to fall over if I even took one step on that stage. And at the same time, so having all of this fear and also something in me saying, you're supposed to be here and you're supposed to be
Mhm.
doing this. And it's just so interesting
Yeah.
how that happens. One thing that I was thinking about is you're so introspective in just hearing, and no wonder you're an author because you are so eloquent with your words. um but even just in the way that you explain things, I'm just like I feel like I've never heard people explaining things in these ways, and it's just so refreshing to hear. But I'm curious, like, where does that piece around you being so introspective and about yourself, almost like
Yeah.
this curiosity that you have about yourself, like, where does that come from?
You know what? That started when I was like 15.
Really?
I started exploring, just looking into me. Like I always knew I wanted
Mm,
to work with people.
yeah.
Always thought I would be in, counseling, therapy, coaching somehow in that
Yeah.
space, right? But I first wanted to figure myself out. And I
Yeah.
remember that it was, I want to say I was like eighth grade. I don't even know how old you are in eighth grade. 14, something like that, 13. I don't even know how old you are. But
I
I
don't know.
remember that. And I used to feel really bad about the way I looked, right? I had a lot of self esteem issues. And I remember one day I was crying about something and I went to the bathroom. I sat there, I looked in the mirror, and I said, "Today will be the last day that you ever cry about the way you look." Never cried again since that day. Okay. And of course, I've changed in these many years, right? But I never ever, it was like a resolution I made within myself, right? From there,
Mm,
I just started reading books about, what is it to be a person, and how do you do introspection? How do you look at you? How do you do all those things? When I decided that this was definitely what I was going to do, as a career path, then my main theme was I never was going to be a hypocrite. I never wanted to
mm,
profess something to others that I did not possess myself. And that was really what drove me for me. That though I'm in this lane of helping other people, I'm also helping myself. It's like,
yeah.
oh yeah, that's great. Oh man, that's great. Let me look into that for me before I hand it to you. And so much of my career has been in teaching. I
Mm,
create courses. I've been doing that again since the 90s, right? So I was able to look at material that was presented to me and then recreate it for the audience that I had. And so, with that, you have to be able to fully digest everything that you're presenting to be able to represent it and add in the wisdoms that you get from it. So it was
yeah.
always like, well, why am I doing that? And why is the greatest question we could always ask ourselves. Why am I doing this?
Mm,
Why do I feel this way? How did I come to this? Why am I so mad about that? And why is my feelings hurt around that? And just being able to have the curiosity around it and not afraid. For me, like your story, resonates because I was a silent child. I did not
yeah.
talk. I did not start speaking really until I started teaching. And it was crazy. After I graduated from college, I went and got certified to teach parenting classes. And I'm used to being in college where you don't necessarily have to really talk, right? Um,
Yep.
so when I went to get certified to do it, you had to teach in order to do it. So I'm like, I'm sitting in the hotel room. Are you serious? How am I going to do this? I don't talk in front of people. And then I came and everything just was a natural flow. And the
Mm,
people were like, "Oh my God, you were so good at this." But my stomach's in my, my chest is in my stomach, and I'm like, I don't ever want to do this again. But then I just started teaching. So I'm like 21 teaching parents, no kids, right? And I'm in this space. Everyone's much older than me, but somehow I was able to
mm-hmm.
connect the stories, right? I was able to be human enough for me not to seem like I'm telling you what to do and towering over you, but I'm able to connect with you on this level of how would you want to be treated, right? And that's kind of like where my parenting I kind of come from. Like, how would you want to be treated if you were here in this situation? So it is that me looking deep within and not being afraid to find the rocks,
Yeah.
not being afraid to see where my own stuff was. It never made me feel uneasy, and it never made me feel
Yeah.
like less than. It was just like
Mm,
more information. It's like I'm an information gatherer. So it was like, oh, this is amazing, right? So every modality I learned, I'm like, oh, that's so good. Look at this aspect of you, right? Look at this vantage point of you that as this person, you're this, but as that person, you're a little different. Why are you more at ease here and more
mm,
tense there? Like, it's just, I'm curious to know why I do things. So it was really that
100%.
plethora, right? It's so exciting. And when you can give people that, like, you don't have to be afraid, even if you discover stuff that you feel is ugly, but it's you. Like, and how did you get that? And where did you pick that up from? So now, it's like,
Yeah.
where did I pick that up from? When was this created, right? And
Mm,
how did you get here? Like, one of the most beloved modalities I love is internal family systems, right? IFS. And it is Richard Schwartz who created it. Amazing.
yeah.
And it's so practical because it gives you this idea that we have a little family within us, right? And so we have all these
Mm,
little parts that were created, and all these little parts were created at an inception, and then they have been
yeah.
trying to protect us our whole life. So you look at it that way. And so when my victim person steps up, I don't have to be ashamed or embarrassed by her. I just say, well, where did you come from, little one? How did we get here and what are we doing today? Right. And so I've met so many parts within myself, through the decades, but then also having that expertise with him of understanding it, of, oh gosh, look at you. There's not a part of me that I have to banish. There's not a part of me that I have to just dismiss. I just have to understand you. And then sometimes I need to tell you to take a seat, right? And just shh for a
Yeah.
little bit and let me take over because I got this now. But I'm always acknowledging all these little
Yeah.
parts of me because they are me. And what a
Yeah.
beauty is that to get to know all of us.
I'm also just witnessing the playfulness around it too. And I know
But
it's
yeah,
not always, sunshine and rainbows, but it also can be. And I feel like this keeps coming up in conversations that I keep having around, when we do that kind of work, right? Whatever you want to call it. I don't just love to call it healing
yeah,
because I don't think it's necessarily always that, but it's just like this work of understanding yourself and getting to really know who you are.
mhm,
It doesn't always have to be in the midst of something crumbling in your life, and it could just it could be this playful aspect to it, and I think that's also such a beautiful thing, and that also makes it feel less scary too. But I'm also kind of sitting with like why I feel like I resonate and relate so much because I've always been equally so curious about why I do things, and
yeah,
also catching myself when I default into those patterns, those little, when somebody else, as you're kind of referring to it, whether it be like that inner child is kind of like taking the driver's seat for a
mhm,
moment, right? Like I'm
yeah,
always so aware. Maybe it's not necessarily always in the exact moment, but just having this very like reflective
mhm.
personality, I feel like. But I'm curious, I'm kind of sitting with like, I don't, because this feels so innate, why are people so afraid of looking like literally beyond like the surface of who we are? Like, why are people so afraid to really get to the core and understand who they are?
Well, you know what? I think a lot of it is socialization, and I think a
Mm,
lot of it is our family upbringing.
mm,
Um, I don't think that for children we honor the exploration of them really finding themselves. I think we
yeah.
want children to be on a certain path and we want them to
Mm,
be obedient and we want them to follow the rules and we want them to get good grades. And we have this idea set out for them of who we want them to be. It's
yeah.
a courageous parent to say, let me see who you're going to become.
Mm,
I tell my parents all the time, and I did do this myself. Like, I'm not just telling people, I did do this myself. Is you have to give your kids years for you to learn who their personality is, right? For you to be
yeah.
able to see their strengths and their weaknesses. I feel our job as parents is to just assist in helping them become the fullness of who they are. So, in that, I need to, if I overly discipline my child, and I'm breaking their wings and I'm stealing their voice and I'm
Mm,
trying to make them look acceptable all the time. There's a part of them that they're never going to show me. And that means
yeah.
there's a part of them that they never get to learn themselves. So part of discipline is really teaching and training, right? That's what
Mm,
discipline means, to teach and to train. It's not to force obedience. So if I'm teaching and training them, then I'm able to look at them. And I did this with both my daughters. I'm like, this is where your weakness is. This is your hurdle. And this hurdle you're probably going to keep most of your life. So when it appears, you know that now you got to get a running start because the hurdle has to be jumped over, baby. This is where we are. This is who we are. And I use myself as an example in that when I was teaching and training them. So I've always been very vulnerable with my kids and letting them see
mm,
me and see the whole me so that they can be vulnerable to show me themselves, but also so they can show themselves to themselves, right? I don't want them to be afraid to be fully who they are because they think someone won't accept them. So if I
mm,
reject my kid because they're having a tantrum, and I'm like, I only want the pretty part of you. I only want when you can speak correctly. I only want you when you're not disrespectful. Then you're telling me there's a part of them that I don't embrace, that I don't accept. Now I can say you got to change your words, like you got to come at me a different way. Right now it's too much, right? But I can still embrace them. I can still allow them to figure it out, because if I'm trying to figure it out still, how to manage my emotions, how to act properly, how to say the right words, of how to construct, why would I think a 5 and 6 year old would have this licked and they will never be disrespectful to me when they don't even know what the word disrespect means, right? That's my construct of disrespect, right? That's my construct of you not honoring me as your mother. I don't have that. So I try to give that to parents, that these are little brains that we are nurturing and training. So when you grow
Mm-hmm.
up without that foundation, which
Yeah.
more people than not have not grown up with that foundation, when you say, look at me, you're telling someone to look at the parts of them that their own parents rejected. And that's
Mm,
pretty scary, right?
yeah.
That my
Very
parents are my
scary.
life source, right? They're my life source for longer than I think any parent wants to realize. That when you cut me off, a part of me dies. So I have to
Mm,
do everything to appease you, to please you, to make you love me, to make me feel like I'm worth being here. Right? It's a default.
yeah.
It's not what we choose. It's a default in being just a doggone kid, right? And so
Yeah.
if I have told you that it's not fun to seek, it's not fun to learn, it's and if I don't show you that, how many parents
Mm-hmm.
show, hey, yeah, I'm taking this class to learn how to self evaluate, or I'm going here and I'm doing counseling, not because destruction happened, right? Why do we run to counseling and coaching and helping marriage and all parenting when everything falls apart? Why don't we say
Mm-hmm.
our relationships are the biggest part of our lives? If they are healthy, we can ride the storms that life brings. When they are
Yeah.
disastrous, we fall apart even much more when we don't have healthy relationships. Yet we do no education on how to be in relationships. We
Mm.
learn history for 52 long years. We learn math concepts we never gonna learn. We do science projects that none of us are scientists. I'm not done. Shout out to the scientists. But we do
Yeah.
all of this stuff. But the things that are constant, consistent in every human's life, we put no effort, we put no energy, and then we say it's a weakness if you have to go have somebody teach you how to be a parent. We say it's a weakness if
Mm.
you have to go get marriage counseling because that means you guys can't figure it out. We then do these things. Well, how am I supposed to ever learn? Why have we made ignorance a thing that we should despise instead of saying ignorance simply means I don't have the knowledge, but I can go get it? Why haven't we made that the thing? Like, man, you are brilliant because you know you're ignorant here and you're going to find the answer. Applauding
Yeah.
you is where we should be instead of the other side. So that's
Yeah.
why we have such trouble of getting different perspectives, because
Yeah.
I've never been gifted often that stance, that language, that idea that I get to do this and I get to do it freely with no embarrassment, shame, or
Mm.
meaning that I'm lacking.
Yeah. The safety piece, right, is such a big part of
So
that.
big.
Not, not feeling safe to be able to like make a mistake, right? Like that's the thing where
Yeah,
we've adopted that where it's not safe to be a part of ourselves. And yeah.
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 Safety is everything. Like we talk about
1000%.
all things in relationships, but we rarely talk about the most important foundation is safety. If I am not safe with you, then I can never show you me and I can never
Mhm.
fully fail, right? Like
And
failing with people
yeah.
is safety.
Yeah. 1000%. That's something that comes up a lot. That's a question I often throw back at people to get them to get curious.
Hmm.
And it goes back to that piece around just taking ownership and responsibility
Yeah.
for our role that we play in relationships. We have in my family, I just have so many different dynamics. And
Hmm.
with, I'm very introspective, especially when it comes to my relationship with one of my sisters. And I always come at it with well, why doesn't she feel safe to come to me? It's
Hmm.
not, she's not the problem in this. And
Right.
that's always something that I also, bring to other people, especially I come from I have two older sisters. So when it's, my other sister too, she's kind of like, "Oh, I don't like this." And I'm like, "Well, why doesn't she feel comfortable to come to you? Why doesn't she
Mhm.
feel safe to come to you and be in your space?" That's not
Right.
on her. That's for you to kind of like check yourself and check what it is, like what are you bringing to the table?
Hmm.
How are you showing up or not showing up for that
Right.
particular person? And that is just one question that really shifts that piece around like not taking things personally. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably where it comes from is that piece, right? Like it's what how can I do better? How can I do better in this relationship? And that creates, I feel like that's such a healthy thing to bring into relationships, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like when two people, like, there really has to be this willingness though in relationships. Safety is a big part, and I feel like willingness is such a big part. It's like I'm
Mhm.
willing to see myself and to know myself and to understand myself, and you be willing to do the same, and then we're
Yeah.
willing to see that in each other, because it goes back to those, like, those basic needs that we're all looking for, right?
Mhm.
And the beautiful thing is we have so many, there's so many different modalities that are out in the world that allow us to get little puzzle
Yes.
pieces of who we are, like the five love languages, all these different little pieces and these elements help us uncover and unravel more of who we
Right.
are. And so
Yeah.
there's just this big piece around just being able, this willingness to understand ourselves and
Mhm.
understand the people that we say that we love. Like that is a part of it, is being willing to love all aspects, all parts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think when you say don't take everything personally, I look at it as I have to first ask the question, did I do something to make them want to reject me? Because sometimes it is personal because I'm the one who screwed up. And then sometimes it's just them on their own tip, right? But that just goes
Mm-hmm.
back to that little introspection part. But I think what we're trying to look at is how do we bridge this gap between humans? Right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we? I mean, we all stand in our own little island, right? But we need to keep making these bridges to other people. And how do we build these bridges? And
Mm.
if I start off with a rickety bridge, right? And I got open holes and the plats are a little rusted and all of that, how do I learn that though my bridge, right, that was created for me from the beginning doesn't have to be a bridge I keep creating? I can
Mm-hmm.
recreate the bridge. I can say these materials didn't work well, but I can go find other materials that make the
Yeah.
bridges strong and secure where you're able to walk across them, a million miles, right? And that's part of what I tell my parents. You're creating a bridge that you want your kids to travel back and forth for the entirety of their life. The materials you use matter. And then it's the same thing when we get into, our romantic relationships or get married. It's the same bridges that we're creating from the beginning, right? With
Yeah.
friends, with everybody. Now, some bridges are short. Hey, some are really, really long and they keep continually growing, but it's still
Mm-hmm.
bridges that we're creating. And we got to figure out, one, what material do we need in order to create good bridges? But then I have to be willing to ask that other person, what materials do you need? Because it can't just be a
Yes.
bridge of my own creation, right? If other
Yes.
people are involved, I have to say, well, what materials do you need? And though they may be different and they may not fully match, right? I'm like in a dark wood, and you want to bring in some neon color, and I'm like, that don't match. But you like neon, I like wood. We can make it work together. Let's be creative in our construction
I love
of
that.
all
I
of
love
this.
that.
But I think it is, we don't rarely have these conversations with each other. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I like you, we vibe, but then after that, what do we have? We
Yeah.
have to create. And I believe the
Yes.
creation part is where we fail miserably because we stop creating. It's fun in the beginning, but we don't realize the creation is for a lifetime. If I want people to stay, it's for a lifetime. And I have to evolve through all the different people they become. You know, like me and my husband been together for 35 years, right? Married for 30.
Yeah.
He's been married to I don't know how many women, right? Because I keep I'm like
But so true.
she's a
So
new one.
true what you're saying.
Sir, we have evolved and we are not the same one. But you imagine from 16 now up to 50, right? That
Yeah.
we're looking at a lot of different women of
Yes.
evolution, of growth, of different mindset, of all of that. But it's my obligation to teach
Mm-hmm.
him who my newness is. It's not his obligation
Mm-hmm.
necessarily to try to create a book out of what he's just seeing. And we do not update people
Mm-hmm.
enough, right? We
Oh,
don't do the update.
yes.
We just, I'm different now. You got to roll with it. Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I was really in love with this other one. Now we don't have to work for me to love you because you didn't change some components of yourself. I know it's good for you, but it's hard for me. So it is this negotiating that we do with our relationships if we want them to last. You know, it's the same thing with
Mm.
our kids. Like who they are at 2 is not who they are at 10. It's not who they are at 15. It's not going to be who they are, right? So I have to grow with them. I can't keep
Mm-hmm.
you still in this little place when now you have ideas and perception and life
Yeah.
experience and all of this. I have to be able to move with you if you're going to stay with me. I'm not,
Yeah.
I cannot live in the presumption that because I birthed you, you're obligated to be in a relationship with me. I still am earning it and vice versa. I tell my kids that too.
Yes.
Don't cut up too much now. But you know, like there's parts that I don't like in character. So if you got that part, it's gonna be hard for us to vibe, right?
Yeah.
And so we learn to move with each other. It's a dance. But both people have to keep the willing feet to
Yeah.
move even when the music changes.
Mm. Yeah. There's, we want to grow, we want to evolve, and we want to be at the core of that. We want to be accepted for who we are at all these different phases of who we are in life. And yeah, there can't be this just expectation of, well, this person's going to know who I am, right? That
Mhm.
communication piece is so huge in relationships, and we forget
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
communication
Yeah.
is huge and that people don't know what we're thinking.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not psychic. We don't read minds. They're like, it's not a thing, right? And that I feel like has been the piece that I'm continuing to learn, especially because I've always struggled with communication, and it's just like the communication part though, when you bring that in, it creates so much more peace and ease in relationships.
Yes.
Hi, I need this in this moment right now. Or I have this, I have this commitment and it's really important to me. And how can I get your support to make sure that I
Mhm.
can be fully and show
Mhm.
up fully in this conversation?
Mhm.
Right? Like it's communication that we're so like afraid, and it feels sticky to ask for what we want in a sense. Um and then to possibly, I guess, receiving comes into this piece too, right? But this piece around being able to ask for what we want, but it all lies in the communication part.
Yeah.
And one thing too that was coming up with this piece around kids, and I can't remember where I heard this, and I'm not a mother yet. If that's in the
Mhm.
plan, then that's in the plan. But
Mhm.
um, I remember hearing about how I don't want to butcher this, but something along the lines of like our job as parents is to protect our children, right? Like especially when they're new in the world, like your job is to protect and to keep them alive. But you don't own, you don't have ownership over your child.
Yeah.
And just the way that
Yeah.
I think taking a moment to really just acknowledge the way that you clearly parent and teach parenting is actually so beautiful, and something that I would love to continue to learn from, because it's this piece around just like, you know giving them the space to be who they are, and not coming from this angle of like, well, I have this ownership over you because you are my child.
Mhm.
And I've always really like struggled with that piece. And, just with my own dynamics with especially my own father, especially because we had that relationship where he wasn't around when I was younger. So it was like, well, who am I to listen to you? There was a little bit of that, but then there's been this space around, well, you're also just human. You're also just trying to figure it out just like I am.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when we can kind of also strip back those layers and
Yeah.
those labels of
Yes.
like they have a purpose, and there's times and places to also let go of the labels that we put on ourselves and
Mhm.
look at our coming from a daughter, but like looking at my parents as they're human and they are doing every best that they possibly can with what they have.
Yeah.
And there is still continuously this co-creation in our relationship, and it's
Mhm.
actually been kind of amazing to just see the way my relationships have molded and unfolded with both my parents.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think that that's the beauty if we can get to an adult relationship with our parents where we still have some
Mm,
connection, right? That we're able to work through the different things that has occurred in our parent child relationship, right? And that we're able to say, hey, this I could not stand, this hurt me, and then they're able to say, but I did it because, or this is why. But that
yeah.
vulnerability is needed, right? In my coaching practice, I have a thing set aside for adult children and their parents so that they can sit
Mm,
here and have the work that is guided, right? So they can have the conversations to be able to do it, because I think a lot of times we we have to be careful even when we become adults of wanting to repair our relationships with our parents or make it better, not necessarily always
mm,
repair. Is that we don't excuse the harms that they did
mm-hmm,
without first understanding of why. Because if
mm,
I say, well, the dingo, well, they did the best they could, right? And that feels good as the child, right? My parents did the best they could. Did they, right? Because it's okay if there were parts of them that didn't give their all to parenting because
yeah,
they were human, right?
of
And so you did
course.
do the best you could. You gave me what you had left over. I need you to acknowledge that so that I can digest that so that I can go ahead and heal fully, right? But it's this honest conversation that often is missing in the process, that me
Mm-hmm,
also honoring the little one in me that doesn't have the logic and
mm-hmm,
the reasoning to say you did your best because work was stressful, or this person passed away, or you and mom were fighting, or whatever. That I honor the little one that only felt, right? Because as kids we just feel, right? Your brain doesn't start, the frontal lobe doesn't start forming till 7 or 8. So before
yeah.
then, that's 7 or 8 years of pure intake that's going on the brain, that you're taking in just really through feelings and observation. I don't have that luxury. So I have to be able to step into the little one, right? And say, you felt awful because they were absent. You felt awful because they yelled at you. You made you feel ashamed and in despair, and be able to label it all so that when we get to the place of being able to unfold it all, I'm unfolding the fullness of it, not just the pretty parts of it.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember, and this happened, coincidentally before my mom passed, we were able to have this conversation. And I'm the
Mm.
youngest. I have two older sisters too. And I'm the youngest, was the quietest, was the least needing out loud of attention, right?
Yep.
And so they allowed that to be, right? My parents both, if I do it from a clinical, it neglected me to a huge degree, right? Um, and when I was able to talk to her about that, I'm like, Mom, like,
Mm.
really, y'all just left me. Like, where the heck is everybody? You
Yeah.
trusted me to just be by myself, and I didn't complain. And she was able to fully apologize. She was able to say, you're absolutely right. Because you gave me the least amount of headache, because you didn't require that much, I did push you aside and did
Mm.
not give you everything that you needed, right? Well, that's
Mm.
all I needed to hear, because I knew that was the truth. Because, of course, I've been observing all my life. I knew that was the truth. I understood your why, but I needed you to acknowledge that for me,
Yeah.
right? So that I can move through that and we can be good now. But it's being honest and being able to get to the place, like I was saying, of
Mm-hmm.
building that bridge with your kids to get to the
Yeah.
place where your kid feels, even if not fully safe, safe enough to walk
Mm.
back over that bridge and meet the parent where they are. And the parent trusts the bridge they built, that they can
Yeah.
walk back across it and meet the child. It is the
Yeah.
most beautiful thing when it
It
can
is.
occur authentically. Doesn't have to be
Mm.
perfect, doesn't have to be always roses. We still gonna have our misconnections. There's still gonna be triggers when you do certain things that's gonna remind me of that little person you was before.
Mm-hmm.
But we've made so much progress that now we're moving authentically in the relationship. And that's about the best us humans can offer each other.
Yeah. Do you feel like there has to be some level of readiness to receive
Mhm.
also the truth?
Yes.
Because it's not also gonna we're not always gonna be met with someone acknowledging,
No.
right?
And
Like
that's where that's where expectation comes in, right?
mm,
Um, so like I'll give you this instance in my own life. Like with my mom, super receptive, right? She could take
yeah,
it, she could hear it, she could acknowledge it. My dad, not so much, right? He's
yeah.
a little more prickly, right? He passed away in 2021, but he's a little bit more prickly. So when I came to him with it, it was more defensiveness. It was more
Yeah.
of this, that, right? His way of bridging the gap was kind of making a jokish kind of thing around it. He's
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging it, but not in full authority of I messed up, right?
Right.
So in me learning my parents, right? Because that's part of also my desire was to know them, not just them know me, right?
Yeah.
For not just them to give to me, but I wanted to give to them too. So
Yeah.
I remember this one time I wrote my dad like a 10-page letter detailing his life, right? Because I've always been, and he's like, little girl, shut up, right? Because you always tell me you cannot save the world. And now look at you, you talk so much, right? Because remember, I was the silent one.
Yep.
I broke down his whole life, right? Of everything. I'm like, this is why you're like this and this, right?
So funny.
But it's crazy, right? But with that, me accepting his limitations. Because
Mm-hmm.
for him, I had to fully accept his limitations and not see them as anything against me. Now that's going to, it's not personal, right?
Yeah.
It's saying that he loved me in the way he loved me to the fullness that he loved me, but within his own abilities. My mother and him had different abilities, right? So when we're able to recognize everybody's capacity to love,
Yeah.
it's not going to always be in the way that you need it, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that they're not giving it. So it becomes this dance with myself of how much less of capacity can I tolerate and still feel loved and still feel
Mm.
cherished and still feel seen, even though it's not at the capacity that I want, right? For me, I want people to be able to meet me where I am like this, like talk honestly, free.
Yeah.
Nah, everybody ain't gonna be able to do that, right?
Yep.
So I have to be able to meet them at capacity and not judge it as negative because they don't have that same capacity that I have. And that's not putting me on a pedestal capacity. That's just saying
No.
we all have different capacities in different areas. And
A hundred
so,
percent.
right? So, like, if I'm loving you and trusting you loving me, I have to be able to accept your full capacities and your limitations because you're
Yeah.
accepting mine, right? Because for
100%.
you, my capacity to run my mouth and be introspective and to pull everything off ain't always that fun for everybody, right?
Yeah.
My husband tells me all the time, I'm not one of your patients. So keep that over there. We're trying to have a conversation. This
I
is not
love
what we're
it.
doing today, honey. We just having
Yeah.
a, I'm like, okay, okay.
All right. All
But you know
right.
what
I'll reel it
I
in.
mean? Okay, let me pull it in a little bit.
Pull it in. Pull it in.
No, you're
Yeah.
not. I'm not going to dice you.
Mm-hmm.
Not right now.
Yeah.
But, it's the movement. Are we willing to kind of move with each other and meet each other where we are?
Yeah. Wow.
Right?
Oh my gosh. I am so grateful for this. This was so beautiful in so many ways. I'm genuinely so appreciative of you and coming to the table, being all of you. And yeah, I'm really grateful for this conversation. I also want to give you an opportunity to share more about where people can find you and
Okay.
also your books. Yeah, I'd love for you to just share as well.
Okay, so my books is called The Wisdom Chronicles. Two have been released so far. It would be a six-part series, but those are on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, all those little book places. The first book is called Open Your Eyes, and that's like your introduction of just being able to see life from many vantage points. So if your eyes are not open, you're always going to hit roadblocks because you don't see it. So the open your eyes part is really you just coming in with everyday wisdoms that you can apply, but there is also books that can be relatable throughout your life. Like you'll read it and you'll be like, this doesn't fit right now, but you'll come back maybe 2 years from now
Yeah.
and you'll be like, oh, that's exactly what I needed to hear, right? The second book is called What I Want You to Know. And I really wrote that over my daughter's life. And
Mm,
those are just probably my motherly wisdoms that I
mm,
want people to be able to pick up. And of course, it works for any stage of life, but it really is a comprehensive kind of guide of looking at life, but through different perspectives, right? And different vantage points to kind of help direct and guide your life. So those two are out now. My website is www.natalielamb.me, and you can find my books there, as well as you can find I have a school that has one course that's called How to Be a Better Human. That one is free, so you can jump on that and really eat that up. It's only 5 parts, very simple, quick to the point. But if you add them into the way you live, you will see your life will look better, right? And then I
mm,
have a marriage course called Uniquely Yours, creating the marriage your way. It really just walks couples through how to create marriage. It doesn't tell you how. I don't
mm,
try to do cookie cutter. I'm just giving you guides for you two to sit down together and have amazing conversations over how you want your marriage to look, so that it benefits you and it only looks like you because you're the only two in the relationship. So everybody else's
mm.
opinion don't really matter. And then my life coaching, my relationship coaching, and my grief coaching, all of that you can find on my website as well. And then I also have a grief group. So if anybody's on Facebook, you can join in with me. It's called The Grief Journey. And that's where we really just talk about learning how to grieve, how to mourn out loud, how to do those things so that you don't get stuck in the loss of someone, but you learn to live with it. And my thing is that you live in an and. I am sad and I'm grateful, right? I am
Mm.
mourning and I still get to live. So it's learning how to
Wow.
not try to close the whole of grief, but how to build your life around it and still have a full life in spite of the
Mm.
losses that we wish we never had to endure. So
Yeah.
www.me, Natalie Lamb, .me, or iyconline.com. You can find the courses.
Love it. And you said something about and it's so funny because I recently heard this and I wanted to acknowledge you as well. I love seeing people who do so many beautiful things and they make it work. And it's so inspiring for me because I resonate so much. I'm like, I have this and I have this and I can't choose one because it feels like I'm cutting off a limb.
Right?
So you just embrace your and in so many ways, and it's just so inspiring and
Thank
empowering
you.
for me to witness that. And so I'm really grateful to have made this connection. I feel like I
Yes.
just want to have conversations with you every single week because you are just fantastic. So I'm so excited for this new
Oh, thank
friendship and
you.
meeting you and connecting with you. I'm so
Yes.
grateful.
Yes, I'm open to come back whenever you want to have another chat. This has been wonderful.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in. Thank you again, Natalie. I appreciate you, sending you so much love. And we'll see everyone soon in another episode. Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.